name's Armando Oliva, and I'm going to be your Realty professor for this class. So a couple of things. If you're logging on and you're taking this class, we know a few things. Number one, that you're at least 18 or older, right? Because to get your California real estate salesperson license, you have to be at least 18 or older. You completed 3 prerequisite courses, right? You probably did principles, practice, and an elective, like legal aspects. So we know you're at least 18 or older. We know you completed the 3 prerequisite courses. And number 3, we know you applied. We know you applied to the California Department of Real Estate to get your salesperson license. Now we just have one step left. That's passing the state exam. Now the state exam is 150 questions, multiple choice, and you're going to pass with a 70% or better. So that's our goal, right? Some of you may get 100, I don't know, but our goal is to at least get 70% or better. So the way we're going to work this is, number one, you got kind of my notes emailed to you, or you downloaded them when you purchased the class. Make sure, if you can, have them printed out and write your notes on top of my notes, because I think there's something really helpful about kinesthetic learning. So try to do that. And of course, you might be listening while you're driving, but if you can, write notes on top of my notes. Number 2, make sure that you have the questions also, because we're going to go over these questions later on, these sample questions. So a lot of people ask me, what do I need to study for the state exam? Exactly what I just gave you. You need my notes, you need the practice questions, and the flashcards I sent you, and that's it. Throw away everything else. And I don't mean that in a mean way. I just mean a lot of the information you might have learned in your prerequisite classes, unfortunately, as you might have found out already, if you actually took the state exam already and failed, it's not on the state exam. So it's kind of confusing. So this whole program is designed to teach you the stuff you need to know so you can pass the state exam. So throw away everything else. Concentrate on my lecture, my notes that you're going to write on top of, and all the practice questions and flashcards that we're going to go over together. All right, so the Department of Real Estate, what's their mission? Well, it's to protect the public, not us, right? So one of the ways to protect the public is to have some minimum requirements to getting this California real estate salesperson license. And I said earlier, what are the minimum requirements? Well, number 1, we got to be 18 or older, so hopefully we're all good there. We have to complete 3 prerequisite courses, which you probably did already. That's why you're in this class, because you're ready to take the state exam. And you had to apply, write a formal government application. And some of you probably also did your fingerprinting at the same time, the live scan. Now we have to pass a 150-question multiple choice test and then hashtag Realtor life, right? Now, you notice I have some offices on the slides. There's hundreds, but these are just some that you might be aware of: Coldwell Banker, Remax, Keller Williams, Pinnacle. So the license you're getting is a California real estate salesperson license, which is fantastic. However, you're going to have to work for an employing broker. So you can't do any deals on your own. So we should make a distinction now between a salesperson license and a California broker license. So a broker it's a higher license and they supervise salespersons underneath them. A salesperson has to work under an employing broker. Okay. Now you'll be able to get your broker license eventually if you want as well, right? If you have your real estate salesperson license for 2 years and you complete a few additional courses that we offer at my school, you'll be able to take the broker exam in 2 years. Or if you're currently a practicing attorney, you could actually go straight for the broker exam. Or if you have a college degree that actually says real estate on it, like real estate Bachelor of Science, you could actually take the broker exam right now. But for most of us, we're going to take the California Real Estate Salesperson exam, and that's 150 questions, and we're going to pass with a 70% or better. I also don't want to forget, make sure you follow me on Instagram at The Realty Professor. It should be somewhere on this video, at The Realty Professor. Watch my YouTube videos. I have additional videos to supplement some of the lectures. And follow my website as well. And I'd love to hear from you when you pass and let me know how you did. And I also do another class called Got My License, Now What? That I'll talk about later. But let's go back to our slides. So you should be able to explain to your friend that you're getting your real estate license, what's required. 18 or older, 3 prerequisite courses, formal application to the Department of Real Estate, and passing the state exam. It's also important to note what's not required, right? Nowhere here does it say college degree. So try to get a refund, see if they'll refund your money. Nowhere does it say high school degree, right? You don't even need a high school degree. You don't even need to be a resident of California. I have people that take my class that live in Texas, but maybe want to do real estate in California as well. So pretty bare minimum requirements. And again, that distinction I made, you're getting a salesperson license and you'll work for one of these many offices. You can interview with them, and I'm sure they'll hire you. They want you. We'll talk about it later, but they want you. So we'll talk about that later. All right. As we go over these slides, I want you to, if you have your notes printed out, I want you to kind of do a little checkbox after every bullet point so that I know you own that now, right? Okay. So the Department of Real Estate has a boss called the commissioner. So who's in charge of the Department of Real Estate? The real estate commissioner. How do they get their job? They're appointed by the governor. Now there's a difference there, right? Elected versus appointed. So the governor, we vote. He gets the most votes. He wins. But the commissioner is appointed by the governor. So make sure you see that distinction. A salesperson is an employee of the broker. Make sure you note that, right? So because by calling you an employee of the broker, it puts a certain responsibility on the broker to supervise you now. And that protects the public. So next bullet point, broker has a duty of supervision of all licensees and their employee. Now, notice I said the broker has a duty to supervise all licensees and their employee, not necessarily all their employees. So you may get a question that says, a broker must have a written employment agreement with all employees, with all licensed salespeople. The answer would be with all licensed salespeople. But salesperson is an employee of the broker, check. A broker has a duty to supervise all licensees and their employee, check. Now, whether you're a contractor or, I started growing a beard now, so I like going to the barber because girls may not know this, but the barber will trim your beard. And when I sit there in the chair, he's got a license. It says barber license from the state of California. So any license from the state of California, contractor, barber, esthetician, chiropractor, there's laws associated with that license. Where do we find those laws? In an area of law called the California Civil Code. So where do we find real estate laws that we as salespeople under the Department of Real Estate have to comply with? In the California Civil Code. Now, if you violate one of those laws, just like if you rob a 7-Eleven, it's a crime, right? It's a crime. You would get prosecuted by the local district attorney in the district or the county in which you committed the crime. So if you get a question that says, well, if a licensee commits a crime or breaks one of these laws, who would prosecute them? The answer is the local district attorney. Not me, your broker. I'm going to try to cover it up, right? Well, let's try to blame RE/MAX or something. So who will prosecute you? The local district attorney. So put a little checkbox there. We own that now. Now, what would the commissioner do? Because remember, we also have this commissioner that's in charge of the Department of Real Estate, separate from the local district attorney in the county where you live and work. Well, they may find out that you committed some kind of crime and maybe you killed somebody, and they go, well, Armando, maybe you shouldn't do an open house this weekend. Maybe we shouldn't have you with the public for a couple of weeks. So the commissioner can suspend or revoke your license. However, they need to give you a hearing, just like the district attorney couldn't just find you guilty. They have to give you a trial, a hearing. The commissioner must give you an opportunity to defend yourself as well before they suspend or revoke your license. So the commissioner can suspend or revoke your license, but they must give you a hearing first. Check. This license we're all getting, depending on when you're watching this video, you'll be getting hopefully your license in a couple of days or a couple of weeks from this class. You'll be good for 4 years. So how long is a California real estate salesperson license for? Good for 4 years. Just like mine. I happen to have a broker license. Mine is good for 4 years as well. So how long is your license good for? 4 years. Child support obligors. I don't know why they say it that way, but basically they're saying if you owe child support, right, you owe your baby mama some money or you owe your baby daddy some money, they're still going to give you a license. So if a question says, will someone on the list of child support obligors get a real estate license? The answer is yes. However, we're all getting a 4-year license, right? We're all getting a 4-year license. They would get a temporary one for 150 days. Now, if they pay whatever they owe within that time, then it'll get extended to the 4 years. However, you need to know that. Will someone on a list of child support obligators get a real estate license? Yes, but how long will their license be? 150 days. Of course, if they pay up, it'll get extended. A broker must carry workers' comp. This is kind of a weird fact, but just know it. So there's a lot of insurances we carry as a broker, as a brokerage, E&O, errors and omission. It's just like liability insurance. We carry general liability. But as far as like written in the civil code, what insurance an office must carry, a real estate brokerage office, workers' comp. Just know that, workers' comp. Now, from your own experience, you might have made an offer on a home when you bought your home, or your parents or a relative, and you might remember that you gave the broker a check, a good faith check, where you said, hey, if they accept my offer, hold this $10,000 and send it to escrow once we open the deal. So it's very common for a broker to handle customer money. Sometimes we collect rents for customers. Sometimes we hold the deposit while the offer is being negotiated, those type of things. And the Department of Real Estate doesn't want us to mix that money with our personal money. Because you can imagine, maybe we get confused. Maybe, is that your money? Is that my money? Maybe if I mix it with my business account, I accidentally pay my rent with it. So I have to carry a separate account called a trust fund account. So a broker must carry a separate trust fund account. Separate, it's just a checking account, but it's separate from my business account and separate from my personal account, and it's for client money. Now, remember, I actually said broker, right? So every salesperson that works for me doesn't need a trust fund account. Only me as the broker of the office needs it. And then as they receive payments from clients, they would deposit in the same trust fund account. So this bullet point, a broker can have how much of their own money in this trust fund account without triggering what we call commingling, where we mix money, up to $200. Now you may go, why? Well, that's confusing. You just said you shouldn't mix your money with client money. Absolutely right. However, the DRE realizes that these banks charge us junk fees, right? Statement fee, image fee, and they don't want me using $5 from your $10,000 condo deposit to pay Wells Fargo. So I can have up to $200 of my personal money, my business money in this special trust fund account for those type of expenses. So it's just the cost of doing business. This one's very important. Like, again, these are not, when we go over questions and stuff, these are not exactly the state exam questions. That would be illegal. That would be cheating. But they're very similar, very, very similar, okay? Maybe you're here because you read my reviews. I have hundreds and hundreds, God bless, of amazing reviews. People just like you that took my class and passed and maybe had been failing until they took my class. They loved it. And I'll be real honest with you. Of the thousands of reviews, maybe 2 are my mom. I will admit, my mom wrote 2 of them that, oh, Iho, he's wonderful. But the rest are all legit, okay? So here's a potential question that I think you should know. So that trust fund account that we just talked about, every month I have to reconcile it. What that means, if you're young, right, you probably never had a checking account that you reconcile, but we used to kind of balance our checking account every month. We'd kind of add up what we spent, subtract what we earned, and then there's a balance. So I have to do that every month with my broker trust fund account. I have to see all the money that came in, client money, and where it went, and I have to do that every month, and I have to keep a copy that I did that for 3 years in case the Department of Real Estate ever audits me. So make sure you know this bullet point. A broker must reconcile their trust fund account every 30 days. Do a little check back. Okay, we own that. Let's keep going. Who needs a real estate license? Well, there are some actual situations where you could do real estate and not have a real estate license. So we might classify this as exceptions to needing a real estate license. So number one, you could sell your own home, right? That's called a FSBO. Make sure you know that FSBO stands for sale by owner. So you could sell your home without a real estate license. That's not a problem. You could also remove your kidney without a medical license. I probably wouldn't do that. I'd probably hire a doctor or something. But there's a lot of things we can do to ourselves without a license, right? So can you sell your own home without a real estate license? Absolutely. What is that called? A FSBO, for sale by owner. Have you ever seen that kind of that on-site manager? Maybe you lived in an apartment, and I always say this as a joke, so hopefully it doesn't come off bad, but like it's always like that creepy guy that lives in an apartment complex, and you're downstairs doing your laundry, and he kind of shows up on you like at midnight. Yeah, he doesn't need a real estate license to be that on-site manager. He doesn't need a real estate. So that's an exception to the real estate requirement. Clerical employees of lending institutions. So you get your offer accepted. Now you need a loan, right? You go to Chase, you go to Wells Fargo, wherever you go, Bank of America, and they're technically helping you with the transaction, right? Because they get the purchase contract, they're helping you with the loan, they're ordering appraisal, and even though they're kind of involved in the transaction, they don't need a real estate license because they're under banking laws and that type of thing. An attorney, in fact, under a power of attorney. Now, my querida madre is a little older, and she's given my brother and myself a power of attorney, kind of be able to act as if we're her, So if my mom wanted to sell her house, and assuming I didn't have a real estate license, she doesn't have a real estate license, I could sell her home acting as if I'm her with a power of attorney. I also want you to remember something from this statement. What do you call the person who's the recipient of the POA, the power? You call them the attorney, in fact. Nothing about being a lawyer, it's just the wording. So make sure you remember that. And we're going to learn about trust deeds and foreclosure. So a lender that's holding a trust deed because he lent you money, the organization lent you money, can foreclose on you, and they don't need a real estate license to sell your home. So a trustee selling under a deed of trust does not need a real estate license. However, for everybody else, if you're going to do any kind of real estate activity, represent a buyer, represent a seller, represent a landlord, represent a tenant, and collect any money, you need to have a license. Otherwise, you can get fined up to $20,000. Now, we've kind of made a distinction, right, between California real estate salesperson and California real estate broker, right? The salesperson must work for an employing broker. Got it. But now let's also make a distinction with this word realtor. Realtor is trademark. So just like FedEx, McDonald's, those names are trademarked. So I can't open up a hamburger shop and call it McDonald's, right? Unless I have permission because I bought into the franchise and I paid. The same way the term realtor is owned by the National Association of Realtors as trademark. So you can only say, hi, I'm a California real estate salesperson, but that doesn't sound as cool as hashtag California's latest realtor, right? Selling Sunset Realtor. So, well, how can I use the term realtor? Very easy. All you have to do is become a member of the National Association of Realtors, NAR. So once you're a member of NAR, it just takes money. I think it's like $60 a year. You can now use the term realtor. So if you get a question, Becky's calling herself the #1 realtor of Santa Monica. Becky does not belong to any trade association. Is Becky doing something wrong? Yes. Because if she belonged to the National Association of Realtors, which is a trade association, she would have permission. But since the question says she doesn't belong to any, then she's using the term realtor, without permission. Okay, let's keep going. Now, we said earlier that the Department of Real Estate's mission is to protect the public, not us, right? They don't care that you're making a lot of money and that you're enjoying your life. They exist to protect the public in the transactions. So this kind of fits into it, where when you paid to get your license right now, your test, most of you probably paid $60 for the test and $245 for the license, right? And I pay that every 4 years when I renew as well. I pay $245 to renew my license. Well, the DRE takes a little chunk of that and puts it into an account called the Consumer Recovery Account. And let's say, remember we talked about the trust fund account, and we said that's kind of an account where you hold client money when they give it to you. Well, let's say a client had given me money, $5,000 to hold, $10,000 to hold, and I took it. I just, absconded. And I don't give it back to them. And they sue me and they go, hey, you took my deposit. And they win, right? So they sue me, they win, they get a judgment against me, and I still don't pay, right? I don't pay, my office doesn't pay, my insurance doesn't pay. They could actually go to the Department of Real Estate and say, hey, one of your licensees, did this, and I won a judgment against them. And this account that's controlled by the Department of Real Estate could pay them, not unlimited, but up to $50,000. Now, in the example I gave, it was $10,000, so it would give them $10,000. But let's say I took $100,000, it could pay them up to $50,000 of that judgment. And then if I keep doing this over and over again, well, the max this fund will pay is $250,000. And then they'll probably ask me to go sell cars. So what should you know about the consumer recovery account? Well, let's take each bullet point. It's financed by our fees, our license fees, check. It pays up to $50,000 max per deal with a lifetime max of $250 for us as a salesperson or broker. And we get suspended until we pay the money back. So make sure you're clear on that. Okay, so we made a distinction, right, between salesperson and broker, right? A salesperson's under the employment of broker. We also kind of clarified who can use the term realtor, a member of the a member of the National Association of Realtors. Well, now let's really clear up the word agent, right? The word agent, because that's commonly used, right? We say, oh, my buddy's an agent at Keller Williams, my buddy's a broker at Pinnacle, my buddy's an agent at the Oppenheimer Group. Well, let's really clarify what we mean. So in California, when you're representing another, you create what's called an agency relationship, right? So which is why the term agent comes. But for our purposes, the broker, meaning the office, is the agent. So let me say that again. For our purposes in real estate, the office, let's say Coldwell Banker, Pinnacle, Keller Williams, Remax, Douglas Elliman, Berkshire Hathaway, whatever office, they're technically representing the client. They're the ones who are the agent. Even though you, the salesperson, are doing all the work, technically the customer is still doing business with the company, really. So maybe this will clarify that. So let's say you go to Wells Fargo and you're going to deposit your big first commission check, right? Your big, fat, juicy commission check. And you go to deposit, and Becky, the teller, is helping you. Becky's very nice. She helps you. But the truth is, you're not doing business with Becky. You're doing business with Wells Fargo, right? If you have a problem, you're going to go to Wells Fargo. And if Becky leaves, that doesn't change your relationship. You're with Wells Fargo. So I want you to think of agency the same way. So a broker is the one actually acting as the agent. The salesperson is actually representing the broker, just like Becky is representing Wells Fargo in the transaction, but Wells Fargo is doing business with you. So you may get a question that says, a salesperson takes a listing, a 90-day listing with their office, but they leave that office in 30 days. Who owns the listing? The broker does, the original broker, because that listing was actually with the broker. So hopefully that clears up. So the broker is the agent. Now let's take each one of these bullet points and own these. A real estate salesperson represents the brokerage and transactions, whereas a real estate broker represents the actual parties. Okay. Now in California, we can have three types of agency relationship: seller agency, buyer agency, and representing both sides, dual agency. So let's do an example here. So let's say you're working for Coldwell Banker, right? And I'm working for the Oppenheimer Group. Well, you have a new listing, fantastic. You have a beautiful new home for sale in the Hollywood Hills. I have a buyer. I bring the buyer. You have the seller. We do a deal together. The question is, what type of agency relationship do you have with your client? Remember, you're representing the seller. So you'd be correct to say seller agency, or technically Coldwell Banker has seller agency. What type of relationship do I have with my client? Well, I'm representing the buyer, so I have buyer agency, buyer agency. Now, why is that important? Because once you create agency, it triggers this higher duty called a fiduciary duty, a fiduciary duty. So what's a fiduciary duty? It's a duty of utmost care, honesty, integrity, and loyalty. It's basically you're having to look out for the client at a higher level. So back to that example. You're representing the seller, you have seller agency, therefore you have a fiduciary duty to the seller. I'm representing the buyer, I have buyer agency, I have fiduciary duty to the buyer. Now here's another question that might pop up. Okay, well, what does the buyer's agent have obligation-wise to the seller or the seller's agent, or vice versa? Since we don't have fiduciary duties to each other because we each have our own client, what do we owe each other? Honest and fair dealing. Honest and fair dealing. Now, it's not fiduciary duty, but it's still honest and fair dealing, right? Don't lie to each other. Now, that same example, right? You were representing the seller. I was representing the buyer. I'm an Oppenheimer Group. You're a Coldwell Banker. Well, now, what if You're representing the seller, you work for Coldwell Banker, and I'm representing the buyer, I work for Coldwell Banker also, right? But we don't know each other, our clients don't know each other. Now the question is, what type of agency do you have? Well, remember, it's not about you, it's about the office. So in that scenario, well, the office is representing both, so that would be dual agency. That would be dual agency. So hopefully you caught that distinction. So the office determines the agency, right? Not the salesperson. So when we had two different offices, we each had our own agency, right? Seller, buyer. But when the same office was technically representing both sides, there was dual agency. Now, when does this fiduciary duty end? When does this duty about most care, honesty, integrity, and loyalty end? Well, when the deal ends. Well, how do you know the deal ended? You got your money. So if you get a really long question and they're trying to check and see if you're still under this obligation to look out for the client, you may want to look for, well, did I get paid? Does anywhere in the question to say you received your commission? Because that would mean the fiduciary duty ended at that point. If you hadn't gotten paid and you're still in the deal, then no, you still have this duty of care to the client. Now, part of your fiduciary duty, this duty of utmost care, honesty, integrity, and loyalty, requires that when you're representing a client, you speak up if you see anything wrong with the property. So when we talk about disclosures later on in another video, we're going to talk about a big lawsuit in 1984. Take a deep breath. There were no iPhones. I don't even think there was Google. But this buyer, Easton, purchased a home in 1984 here in Southern California, and there were all sorts of problems with the home that the seller did not disclose. Now, we'll go more into that later, but what does it have to do with agency? Well, in that transaction, the brokers kept their mouth shut, even though they knew there were problems with the home. So as a result of that, we call a landmark case when a lawsuit actually dictates changes in the industry. The landmark case of Easton versus Strasburger, 1984, you may want to know that, 1984, Easton versus Strasburger. It now required brokers, they can't stay quiet. They actually have to speak up. In fact, they have to conduct a reasonable, that means something, reasonable visual inspection of all accessible areas and disclose any material facts in writing. Whereas in that example I gave, they stayed quiet. Now, that doesn't mean you're not hiring the home inspector and the termite guy and all the other inspections we hire to look at home. But in addition to that, you're required to conduct a reasonable. Now, reasonable means, would the average bear do it? Would you look up? Would you look down? Would you go outside? Would you note stuff? That's the reasonable standard. Now, accessible also means something. You don't have to break open a door that's locked. That wouldn't be accessible. So does a broker have to investigate a locked HOA rec room as part of their fiduciary duty? No, because it's not accessible. Does a broker have to climb on the roof in their brand new Louis Vuitton heels? Nope. That wouldn't be reasonable, right? So, but would it be reasonable to look around to note that, oh, there's some moisture stains on the ceiling, there's a fire department next door that might be noisy? Yes, that might be reasonable. Okay, every time I come across a bullet point that I think you should really, really know, I'm going to kind of shout it out. So you should know this one. And by the way, there's no math on the state exam. I know a lot of people are concerned, is there math on the state exam? There's no math on the state exam. Please know that. Yes, I know your friend that took the test 30 years ago told you there was all sorts of math, but number one, that was 30 years ago. They changed that about 9 years ago. How do I know? Because I passed 10,000 people. That's how I know. So for the past 13 years. So the DRE has eliminated math on state exam. Now, that doesn't mean they might not put it back on. For right now, there's no math on state exam. So don't waste time learning mathematical equations. I think they've learned that real estate salespeople are salespeople, they don't like math. They like selling. But with that said, you may get a question that says, how is a broker's commission calculated? So let's look at this. It's calculated by multiplying the sales price times how much commission you negotiated. So in this example, you sold the house for $1 million and you negotiated 5%. That's $50,000 commission. So make sure you know that. How is the broker's commission calculated? Well, by multiplying the sales price times the percent commission equals how much you earn. Now again, rule number one, in business and in life, everything's negotiable. So we'll talk more about that later about, well, how much can you charge? And what if you want to charge 6%, 7%? What if you want to do it for 1%? It's all negotiable. This next one we should really understand, RESPA, R-E-S-P-A, which stands for Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act. It's very common in our business. In fact, I just got a deal in escrow yesterday, and you ask the client, who would you like to use for escrow? You know what they say? What's escrow? Or if you go, who would you like to use for the title insurance company? They go, I don't know any title insurance companies. Or very often a client may even ask you, hey, do you know a good lender I could work with? And you're like, yeah, sure. So what is RESPA, the Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act? It's a law that says it's perfectly fine for you to recommend these other companies that are not even under the Department of Real Estate. They're under their own agencies. But what's not fine is you asking for a kickback, right? So if I go, hey, use this escrow company, and then I call up the escrow company and I say, hey, where's my Mastro's gift card, right? Because that may not be in the best interest of the customer, right? Because that company may then overcharge the customer to pay my Mastro's gift card, or the title insurance company may not do a good job or overcharge them to pay my Hawaii vacation, right? So what's RESPA? It's a federal law that says it's perfectly fine for licensees to recommend settlement provider companies. What's not okay is to ask for a kickback. All right, let's keep going. Now, hopefully the first deal you do is a listing, right? Where someone hires you to represent them in the sale of the home. So here's where we kind of can go back to that agency question. So a listing agreement is a contract between two parties. Who are the two parties? The broker and the seller, not the salesperson, right? You're doing all the work, but it's the broker negotiating technically with the seller, right? Because the contract is between the broker and the seller. So what are some must-haves in a listing agreement? Well, it must be in writing, number one, so make sure you circle that in the notes. So hopefully you printed this out and you're writing it down. So must be in writing. It must have a definitive termination date. What does that mean? A beginning and an end. Now, a listing agreement could be 1 month, 6 months, 1 year, whatever you negotiated. Now, also, it actually has to have this language in it. Let's read it. The amount of our rate of commission is not fixed by law. It is set by each broker individually and may be negotiable between seller and broker. There was a lawsuit many years ago, I don't even know when this was, but I think in the 50s, where offices were telling customers, hey, it's the law, I got to charge you 6%. That's kind of where the 6% came from. And that's not true. There's no law that says that. Well, those companies eventually got sued for something called the Sherman Act, antitrust. You might remember that from high school, the antitrust Sherman Act. Well, as a result of that lawsuit many, many years ago, when is that? I think like 60, 70 years ago? Now, in our listing agreements, whenever we list a 1 to 4 residential unit, what's 1 to 4 residential unit? A condo, a townhome, a duplex, a triplex, a single family home. Our listing agreement must have the language that says, hey, commissions are whatever you and I negotiate. They're not fixed by law, which means you could charge more than 6%. Or maybe you do it for 4%, whatever it is you negotiate. Now, 4 types of listing agreements we need to understand for the state exam. The first one, if you end up working for me at my office, the only one I want you to use is the first one, which is the exclusive right to sell. Now, why do I like that one? Well, let's read it carefully. Broker gets paid regardless of procuring cause. Now, in law, procuring cause means something. It means the reason why it occurred, So let's read this question again. Broker gets paid regardless of the reason it sold, right? So that means if you find the buyer, you get paid. Another broker finds the buyer, you get paid. The neighbor comes next door and says, oh, I noticed you're selling. I'd like to buy it for my daughter. You get paid, regardless of the procuring cause, no matter who brings the buyer. The next one I don't like. Actually, I don't like the next 3, but I'll tell you why each one. So the exclusive agency, make sure you see there's a distinction between exclusive right to sell and exclusive agency, seller reserves agency. Let's read it together. Seller reserves the right to find own buyer and not pay commission. What? So it's almost like the seller's competing with you. If they find a buyer, they can cut you out. Well, I don't like that. Broker could get cut out, right? Maybe you're all dolled up for the open house. You got your cookies, you got your music, and you're ready to go do the open. The seller calls you and says, hey, don't worry about it, Armando. I sold it. Well, not only are you not going to get paid anything, but you maybe put in a lot of weekends. So I don't like that type of listing. Next one, net listing. Well, that's where a seller says, hey, I'll pay you a commission only if I net a certain amount. Like I have to get at least $1 million, then you can get above that. So, well, technically, what if it sells for $999? Well, you'd get nothing. So if the offer is not enough to cover the minimum seller net proceeds, broker may get no commission. That's legal, but discouraged in California because it could work the other way, right? Where the seller says, "Oh, I just want to net $1 million," but their house is really worth $2 million. You're like, "Sure, no problem," right? So that probably wouldn't be in the best interest of the customer either. And an open listing, you show up to the listing appointment. You're like, "Hey, what's Bob from Coldwell Banker doing here? What's Tom from Keller Williams? What's Becky from Berkshire Hathaway?" The seller hires all of us in an open listing. However, the seller's only going to pay the office that actually brings the buyer. So we're all running around and we might be wasting our time and money. So an open listing seller hires multiple offices, but only procuring broker gets paid. Or maybe you did such a horrible presentation that the seller says, "I think I'll sell it myself." FSBO, for sale by owner. So make sure you understand the differences between these 4 types of listing agreements, right? And finally, before we end this segment, let's talk about some fair housing laws. So steering, you need to know that word steering. It's when you're showing property in areas only because of the race, ethnicity, sexual preference of the customer. So maybe you go, "Oh, Armando, I'd love to show you Van Nuys." I'm like, "No, I'd like to buy in Calabasas." And you're like, "No, let me show you." And I'm like, "Well, why do you keep rolling your R's? I don't understand." Armando. Well, they may be guilty of steering where they're kind of like pushing me to an area only because of my ethnicity or my race, you know? It's hard when you're named Armando, like I can't hide what I am, you know? So redlining is now a lender will maybe draw a circle on a map. I'm not saying they do that now, but there was a time when maybe they drew a circle on a map and said, "Oh, we're not going to lend in this neighborhood because of the makeup of the people." Well, that's illegal. That's called redlining. And the next 3 go together. So make sure you understand the next 3: panic selling, block busting, and panic peddling. That's when you're trying to scare the seller. So agent incites homeowners to sell by saying property values will fall due to certain ethnic, religion, races moving in the area. So that's the opposite of steering. That's where you're not showing a buyer areas that you want to show them despite what they told you, only because they're race. This is where you're trying to scare sellers. You go, "Oh my God, some guy named Armando is going to be buying next door to you. You better sell before values go down." And that's not true. Everywhere I've lived, prices have doubled. So make sure you understand the difference between steering, redlining, and then just bundling these 3 together: panic selling, block busting, panic peddling. Okay, that's our first segment. Get ready for the next one.